I speak to you in the name of God, Creator, Redeemer, and Sustainer. Amen. Please be seated. We're going to be going in a couple of different directions, but I just had to say right off the bat that I found it really funny to hear Jesus saying to the disciples, "Have you understood all this?" And instantly they say, oh yes, we have. And yet I'm sure that when most of us listened to all these readings, we were kind of scratching our heads, trying to figure it all out. Well, unfortunately, or fortunately, I'm not going to be discussing the letter to the Romans, although Sharon, you did a great job. And it is a passage that is very much used during funerals. Perhaps that's the reason why I'm not really covering it. I'm going to take a look at the reading from Genesis and also the Gospel. I want to explore Genesis because, in one sense, Genesis, the story of Genesis, with Jacob and Laban discussing Laban's daughters, Leah and Rachel, in one sense, it's a story of love and service. There's a great emphasis on how Jacob absolutely loves Rachel and how he serves Laban not 7 years, but 14 years to get the woman he wants. But it's also a story about deceit and power. It's also a story about lust. It's also a story about value and worth and seeing women as property. And that's where the rub gets really uncomfortable for us in the 21st century, because we do not see human beings as property, let alone women. So if you're going to hold on to anything at this point in time with that introduction, the two key pieces that I want to offer are, number one, do not underestimate your significance in God's eyes. Hear that again. Do not underestimate your significance in God's eyes. And second, never underestimate one's place in God's kingdom. Never underestimate one's place in God's kingdom. 20 years ago, I met a lady, and she was 74. Her name was Ruby Clark. She was a retired second grade teacher, and she had married her sweetheart, who was named Roland Clark, and he was the principal. I guess they met at school. And I had a great friendship with the two of them, and over a course of about 8 years, Roland died. And everybody thought that Ruby was going to fall apart, because Ruby was very diminutive. She was about maybe 5 feet tall. She was all bent over. And she had spent the last 15 years of her life looking after Roland because she loved him so much. So she never got out. She didn't go and do things. She was there. She was making his meals. She was doing all the things that she wanted to do because of her love for him. He died. And as is custom, I did the funeral, and I followed up the week afterwards and had a visit. And a beautiful little place in Mount Pearl. And I sat down and I said, "Ruby, how are things going to be?" And she said, "I think they're going to be okay." I said, "Oh, yeah." She said, "My daughters, they're off doing, one's a veterinarian, the other is a doctor in Montreal. They've got their lives all sorted out." She said, "I think I'm going to take up yoga." I said, "Oh, okay." And so we had yoga at the church 3 days a week, and sure enough, she would walk from her home on 2nd Avenue all the way over down to Smallwood Drive and come for yoga 3 times a week. And people were amazed. And then, of course, the Women's Guild, or the Anglican Church Women in Newfoundland, as it's called, came together, and they had this really controversy. Every January, February, they had to elect a new president. And you know how people just don't like to take on leadership roles at times? Everybody wants to take the back seat. And so it was about 4 or 5 months after Roland had died. And she went to the meeting because she was going to the meeting and all the rest. And, I was chairing just that portion for the elections of officers. And I said, who do we have to nominate for the president to look after this? And there was silence. Oh, somebody said, I did it 2 years ago and I can't handle it. Oh, I've got a sick husband at home. And no, my grandchildren come all the time. I can't do it. No, can't do it. And I said, well, you got to do something because I can't be the president of the women's group. I just can't do it. I got other things to do and I'm not a woman. And slowly, this lady stood up. As I said, she was only about 5 foot tall, so she was barely over the heads of some of the other women. And she spoke with a quiet voice, and she said, I don't know if I could do a good job at it, and I'm going to need a lot of help from others, she said, but I'm willing to give it a try. And she was the president of the ACW for 3 years, and everybody doted on her and made sure that she would do an excellent job, and she gathered people around. And whenever there was controversy and somebody was, how we get in groups and people talk and all the rest and people don't want to do certain things, she would just sit there quietly, and then all of a sudden everybody would realize that she wasn't talking. And that's how she held on to the group. And I share this with you because Ruby from the outside seemed as if she was not important, not significant. And she took on her life with Roland with love. And she took on her life as president of the ACW with love as well. After she retired from her 3 years as president of the ACW, the following year, she came to me and she said, I have to give up yoga because I have cancer. And so for the next 3 years, she fought cancer and finally died. And she died on the 8th of January, in the middle of a snowstorm. She called me up that morning. She said, I'm not well, could you come? I came. Her daughters were there, and she couldn't even get out of bed. And I said, I'll help you. And I lifted her up and put her in her chair and waited for the emergency services to come. And she went to the hospital, and within 4 days, she had died. And when we had her funeral, and I sang at her funeral, and we did all the things that were necessary, the place was packed, and everybody spoke of the love and the commitment and the passion that woman had had, and how, for whatever reason, they had not seen it before she had taken those steps to go to yoga, to become a president of a women's group that was tangly, before she had offered herself in love. We offer ourselves a lot in service and love, not just to our partners or husbands or wives, not just to an organization, but to various other things. And the challenge for this passage in Genesis is that women are seen as pawns, right? Leah is really given a bad rap. Her father says, oh, get all dressed up in the wedding gown. She knows that she's not Rachel, and she knows that her husband-to-be is going to be disappointed because she's not the one that he loves. And yet she still goes along with it. You see, their society was a lot different than ours. Their society was a society that was established about 11,000 years ago, an agricultural society that valued family and heirs because they could be workers on the farms. They could be shepherds. They could tend the fields. And Jacob is absolutely disgusted because Laban has deceived him. Laban has been, he just wants all the work that he can get out of Jacob. He doesn't care about his daughters on one level, really. He knows that they're there and he's going to find a way for them to be cared for, but he wants his land tended to. He wants his sheep looked after. And Jacob, it's amazing that Jacob gets upset about it, because if you remember the story of Genesis, in Genesis, the story of Jacob is that Jacob is deceitful himself, right? He steals his brother Esau's birthright. And that's why he leaves town, because he's afraid that Esau is going to kill him. That's why he gets over to Laban's place to find some kind of sanctuary where he will be protected. So in the story in Genesis, we find that God upholds and responds to the vulnerable, to the women, despite the failings of the men around them. Leah is not seen as beautiful in Jacob's eyes, and yet God blesses her, and she has 4 sons who are strong and healthy, plus girls as well. Those who are seemingly powerless control the fate of the nation and the future. Jacob's not the important people of this story. Laban is not the important person. The important people are Leah and Rachel and their servants. And they, if you continue on in the story in Genesis, they become blessed by God, all 4 of them. So switching now to Jesus' stories and parables, we hear about mustard seeds, we hear about yeast, and we hear in those parables that those things that we think are insignificant become things of great worth. Right? Jesus was a great exaggerator, probably like most preachers, myself included. We know that mustard seeds aren't the smallest seeds. Now, we're not going to get into literal debates on all this kind of stuff. We know there are tinier seeds than mustard seeds. But he's explaining things to get a point across. He's saying, take this, the smallest of seeds, and it becomes the largest of trees. Again, you only have to walk around Nelson and know that mustard seeds aren't that really big compared to all the other trees around. But that is the message, that we have insignificant, seemingly insignificant things that can become great and wonderful in life. And going on from there, Jesus talks about the other parables of the treasure in the field and the merchant in search of fine pearls, and how they give up everything to possess this great wealth. Well, there's 2 different interpretations on this. The traditional interpretation is that these parables remind us that we are called to give up everything in order to gain salvation, right? That we find a pearl, which is our salvation, and so we sell everything so that we can possess it. Or we find a treasure in a field, and we know that that is important and valuable, and so we sell all our wealth in order to possess it. And again, the question comes there then, what would we be willing to give up in order to possess the things that we believe are important? Eternal life, perhaps, or happiness, or peace, or justice. But there's another translation, another interpretation that turns it on its head, and instead of us giving up everything to possess something, maybe it's God who's giving up everything. Maybe God values us as the pearl of great price. Maybe God values us as the treasure hidden in the field. And so maybe God values us so much that God is willing to give up everything that that God has in order to redeem us. Which begs the question, how much will God pursue the riches of who we are? How far will God go to come and find us and sit next to us and be present to us in our lives? So, we can be the mustard seed and the yeast that can grow into a community or an individual or a society that can offer greatness to the world with regard to compassion and justice and peace. And I think that's what we do as a faith community every day. Not just when we come to gather and worship, but when we work at the food pantry, when we help out with a community meal, when we take time to listen to somebody who is suffering. And we treat people as if they are the treasure in that field and the pearl of great price. That we will do anything to make sure that those treasures are valued so that when found and cultivated, we can together transform the world. So I wonder, think to yourselves now, would the world look without you if you didn't exist? Here's a harder one. What would the world look like without those whom you love the dearest? I believe these scriptures today call us to transform the world in the gifts of who we are. That we are called up as human beings in this place amid all the worries of life, the torment, the struggles of daily life. The climate crisis, war, injustice, economic uncertainty, job uncertainty. We are called in the midst of all of that yuckiness to bloom and grow despite the struggles that are present in the world. We are called to come alongside God to help love transform the hard places into places that can be bountiful. That we are called to let service enable and let justice flow, that we are to speak up for those who have little voice or no voice, and that we can come from seeds, from pearls, and from yeast to be a community that transforms everyone and everything around it. This is the challenge of our day. Seed planting, fish netting, bread baking, pearl hunting God, you shape us into living parables. May your Spirit in us transform us so that we may understand our experiences as healing metaphors and become creative and abundant stewards of the environment you entrusted to our love.